There was a man called Sullivan who was murdered. He was an employee of a man called Desmond, and Desmond believed that he had informed on him. So Desmond's brother killed him. So Desmond and Dunn were court-martialed, sentenced to be flogged, and then hanged. That's two of the executions mentioned in the Handbook for Law for 1798. And there are two others then, Charles Gallagher, convicted of swearing in members of the United Irishmen. So we have these people. I won't go through this background and the backdrop that Philip has painted for you, but literally there was an absolute appalling oppression of people at that time. In addition, in the case of Youghal, there's a story of a blacksmith called Pádraig na Gá. If you're not an Irish person, the word Gá, G-O-W, is blacksmith. So Pádraig na Gá would be little Patrick the blacksmith. And he was flogged on the Mill Road. The Mill Road would be on the other side of Youghal. He survived the flogging. He said it cured his asthma. So if you want a little, if you have asthma, a touch of flagellation might help. I don't know. Anyway, but all over the area, the manufacture of pikes was going on, and Philip mentioned this figure of 1,000 being found. Like it's a huge amount of work going on in the background. So. What caught my eye in particular was that in 1948 there was a special commemoration in Youghal to remember the events of Youghal in 1798. And I think we kind of skipped 1998. It seems to have gone totally past us. But they had a particular committee, a wonderful committee of people brought together. There were teachers, librarians, there were all sorts of people, lawyers, solicitors, politicians, a huge committee involved, and the idea was to formally celebrate the people who were involved in Youghal in 1798, put plaques on the graves of those who had suffered, erect a statue to Father O'Neill outside where the water rally is, and they produced a wonderful little booklet that you see here, which details the events. So this committee, it was to look at not only the annals but also the history and the traditions of the town. In particular, the one name that caught my mind is Pádraig O'Madine. Those of you who were a little bit older will remember he had a wonderful article in the Examiner every day. It happened this day, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, whatever. Pádraig O'Madine was one of the people acting as an advisor to this committee. So you can almost say that they did a reasonably substantial and thorough piece of work. However, there's no mention of a James Fitzgerald in that story. But, so the question is, who was this James Fitzgerald? Because family traditions always have truth in them. It mightn't be exact word for word as it came about, but it's there. So what can we actually find out? Well, we have to look at a man called Walter Croker Poole, and he has a house at Ballyanchor. Now, Ballyanchor has various names on the maps. This Ballyanchor, A-N-C-H-O-R. It's outside Eastmore. He got his land from Lord Boyle. One of his family is married to Greatrakes. You remember Valentine Greatrakes and the Stroker and all of that, the witchcraft trial. This is he's buried in there. He's buried in Lismore, but his house was attacked by the defenders. We had this difference between United Irishmen and defenders, and when they surrounded his house and demanded he give up his guns. Now he had boarded up all the windows, but pikes were used to break the windows, the upstairs windows, and Croker surrendered his guns, but he was able to identify his attackers, which suggested to me that they were local people. Okay. Now, just to let you know where we are, there's Lismore Castle. You're coming in the Youghal Road here, and here down here we have Ballyanchor, or Ballyanchor, depending which way it's spelled in two different ways on the maps. So here we have the area, and this is Lismore Castle, and you probably know where you are now at this stage, yeah. if you know the area. Okay, so this is where it's actually happening. So the people involved in the story must be reasonably, well, not too far from there. Okay? Now, So there was a series of arrests and courts martial. Now, the interesting thing for those courts martial is that you can, and Philip has those in his book, by the way, if you get to read them. On the 16th of June, there were 4 courts martial. I should say court martial is a sort of more, but courts martial is correct. But anyway, there were 4, and the idea they went through very briskly. And what they did was, on the 14th of June, there were a series of court martial. Then they took the 15th off to have a bit of fun and watch the executions. Then they went on the 16th, and the next day they took off to watch a few more executions. It was kind of, full majesty of the law at the funeral, the funeral with at the execution. So the very first of these was James Fitzgerald, and he's a blacksmith accused of making and keeping pipes of rebels. It was his second trial, and the others involved a group of defenders, and there were 2 militiamen accused of enticing men away from their loyalty to the crown. By the way, they didn't use the word enticing. They used a lovely word. In those days, the word was "you seduced a man," which would be read in a slightly different way today. But anyway, okay. So we can actually get the documents. You go to the National Archives in Dublin. You can actually get. So we have it here. The trial of James Fitzgerald. So we have the suffered death, whatever the different penalties. So. Court proceeded for the trial of James Fitzgerald, blacksmith, accused of forging pikes, having 19 in his possession, etc., etc., etc. He had promised not to do it, but he said he had to, and blah, blah, blah. So he gets 1,000 lashes. And some of the other trials, anything over 200, your chance of living weren't great, but 1,000 was pretty severe. It wasn't quite the 1,500. 1,500 was the most severe of that series of it gave rise to the expression "to within an inch of your life." Anyway, this man got 1,000 lashes. We don't know whether he survived. I suspect if the family think that he was hanged, that he possibly died as a result of it, and that simply he was executed in the punishment. That it's most likely. Court were extraordinarily fast. His one there, literally, that's the entire court case. There are no witnesses. Literally, in those days, there weren't. In his case, he had either had or hadn't got the pikes. He had the pikes, therefore, that's it. End of story. Now, the subsequent trials, by the way, did have the man, Croker Poole, who presents the trial. He's questioned by the people on trial. There are no barristers. It's a very quick process. So they might read 2 pages, but you're talking about a very, very speedy trial. Now, so our friend gets his sentence, and the other guys, Florence McCarthy, he's described as having a white band around his coat, and it's an interesting kind of a colour to have, because the white would be the Jacobite colour in those days. Very definite kind of a both religious and political thing to have. The 2 men who were sentenced to actually have of seducing people away, enticing people away, they were sentenced to death, and then the court adjourned to watch the proceedings. So in that batch of court martials that took place around the 16th of June, flogging for some people, 200 to 1,500 lashes, transportation, sometimes you could have both. Father O'Neill, you heard earlier from Philip, was both flogged and transported. There was hanging, and there were some people both hanged and flogged, and then a number of people had insufficient evidence and were released. Now, there were 11 court martials before that 16th of June in Cork. Of those, there were 11 trials, so 4 executions, 4 transportations, 2 acquittals, and 1 man put on bread and water for 3 months. A kind of a variety of punishments. But I'm surprised at how small the number is, because if you have this huge campaign of brutality in an area, you're bound to have an awful lot more deaths than that. You have to have. You're going to have an awful more suffering. If you're using pitch caps on people and you're half hanging and so on and so on and so on, burning houses down, you're absolutely guaranteed that there are a lot So the question we put then is, did James Fitzgerald survive? We actually don't know. And I know you might have seen that lovely headstone. The chances are that the lady who cleaned that is probably down there in the Phil, were you involved in that, Phil? I'd say you were, because Phil has done incredible work out in Ballymacoda on the graveyards out there. But the trouble is, all the registers we have, they start around the late 1790s, 1816, 1820. There's a gap, and it's almost impossible to bridge that gap. You might be lucky occasionally in getting one, but certainly the Catholic tradition people won't have those records. The keeping of Catholic records doesn't come compulsory in the 1850s or so or beyond, but they're beginning to keep records once they're allowed to have churches. But that begins 1793, when they're allowed. So the Father O'Neill's church out in Ballymacoda, they would have had their 200th celebration, a year or so ago, because that's around the time they were allowed to have churches. So unfortunately there are huge gaps in the records, and you can't actually say. You do occasionally find here, for example, we have a name here, Jacobus Fitzgerald. I don't know if you can see that or not. Jacobus, Jacobus Fitzgerald. Can you see that? No. These records are written in Latin. So Jacobus is James. So, but the trouble is that James, we don't know. It possibly could be his son, because again, names stay in family. But can I invite somebody to come up here? Kay, would you come up a little bit up here?
Well, you can. I'll stay here.
Well, I know that Kay and I, we both looked at the records to see if we could actually match back, because I mean the name, this particular family, there are a number of them here tonight, and there are, for people in the Youghal area, for example, this family is connected to Michael Hackett. They're connected, who's hugely involved in local history in the area here. There are lots of them here and travelled to come here, and they're very obviously a family that's keeping in touch with each other. And it would be lovely if we could break that little kind of brick wall between the 1815 back. It would be lovely to know what actually happened to James Fitzgerald. But like the legend, yes, he was a blacksmith. Yes, he got into trouble. Did it actually happen in Youghal? It could have. But when you have all those records, it's very hard to say that the events in Youghal, surely in say 1948, somebody would have said, look, by the way, there was also this guy in trouble. Have no doubt at the moment, 1916, the number of people who were in the GPO is rising every day. And when you have that, so in the 1948 booklet was very significant. So I would suggest that the James Fitzgerald was the man who would have been in trouble, we'll say, in Ballyanchor. That's the man there, and that he probably died as a result of his punishment, and that bit by bit that would have become an execution. No, I don't know. This is a simple answer. Okay, so I'll leave it there with you. Thank you for that. That was 1830.
Was that 1832 then?
Sorry, 1832. Yes. But you see, in this case, this was a person who was as a witness at a wedding, if I remember correctly. And the difficulty is that it's unlikely that a best man would have been James Fitzgerald, the blacksmith, at that stage. It could have been his son.
He was a witness at the wedding where?
In Knockanore. In Knockanore.
Could we write down that? I'd like to get the copy of that.
I'll give it to Sean, and I'll pass on the record to Sean. Okay. It's lovely to actually, when you have a family and there's something to search back into and to look at it. It's wonderful.
When we got back as far as the 1842.
Yeah,
and know yourself.
And the new records are now allowing us to do this at home. The only difficulty is that some of the handwriting is appalling, some of the ink is appalling. It's difficult to read, and some of the stuff is faded, and but at the same time we can do quite a bit at home now. We don't Philip was doing his book, you were, I say, out of the archives, and when you see the footnotes, it's a sign of somebody who's a lot of footnotes and really well researched. You know that the work has been done.
A lot of the records I found in Dublin, they were faded away.
Yes.
It was very hard to see them.
And
they count the writing.
And they've made the microfilms of them, but the trouble is that they rarely allow you to see the originals, where you might have a better chance. You know.
I've been up there recently there now, and they've all the microfilm machines and icons on this. It's all digital now, you know, but I had a lot of stuff going out before.
Okay, sorry.
A trick to do with very, very faint writing is if you get a red see-through transparency,
Okay.
you put on top, it actually brings the black up.
Oh, very, very good. Okay.
No, but if you put that on the screen before, well, I don't know about, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but before on the other screen, once you put in your hand, it blocked the light.
Okay. No, but it's worth, because I mean, when we were doing the grave things there, we were being taught things like by using bright lights and mirrors to bring up the shadows, and it was, you know, we were warned not to use certain things, not to be rubbing personal graves. Yeah.
I was in there one morning, she was an archaeological, I can't remember, she was walking in the archaeological, she was the river on the bus.
Oh no, that's what we were told. Not to use. Anyway, folks, what we do is we might call a halt tonight. There's a whole series of stuff on Saturday and Sunday, and you have really an incredible treat in town if you have a chance to visit Walter Verling's exhibition. It's absolutely stupendous stuff in both the town hall and in Snell Shop. Sorry, question.
Where can one get Philip's book?
The man himself is here. Actually, I got it. Yeah, it's actually available also. I got it on Amazon.
I have a few copies of that. The talk I gave this evening, if somebody wants to come and get some.
Okay, so if you're interested, there's a copy there of the talk. Okay. The 1798 book, I'm sorry, I came across it just quite by chance, and I have it there, but it's that's just the proceedings of the 98th commemoration for Youghal. But it's not commercially available anymore, because that was obviously a few years back. But at the same time, it was fascinating because what I did was, a few people have asked me for it already, and I've emailed it to them, which is easier, because reading documents on the website is just easy to read a PDF if you want to. Okay? Anyway, thank you very much, folks, and good night.
Will you be down to town hall during the week? If there's anything you're interested
What? When I go then he's going to go up.
Will we see you tomorrow?
This is built in 1480.
What?
This castle's there, like, you know, there's an interview there.
Oh, is it there?
Pardon there.
So I've got to look when everybody's gone.
Here's the space there. Okay.
I was going to go up just to get my photo.
No, I don't. Please do. No, I'll have to reconstruct something there because I don't know what way with the. And